You're listening to the 14th Source for all geek and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. The episode for Friday, March 4th, 2022. March 4th, and be strong, or something. I'm not sure. Let's just start with it, with the realness of everything. Not to get sad, and like, the world's really shitty right now, as Europe is collapsing. And I feel like it would be irresponsible to move forward and not say anything about the invasion of Ukraine right now. Andrew and I didn't talk about this beforehand. We really feel for all the people of Ukraine, and we hope this resolves in a manner that saves lives. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going that way. And that really fucking sucks. It's really scary. And I just wanted to acknowledge that shit is really scary right now. And even though we're going to talk about nerdy shit, I just want to say that things are really scary. And we're not ignoring it.
I mean, it's tough, right? This is that situation where... I mean, it's weird because, like, there have been invasions, there's been war for, I mean, most of our lives.
Right.
It's suddenly this one, and I mean, and I realize that, like, there's a lot of reporters who are saying this is the first time something's happened in Europe, and Trevor Noah has a lot of really good takes on this. Like, Europe is a country that made its whole history on war, but I think the real thing is just that we're seeing kind of this continuation of stuff that feels like it could get out of control quickly. That's I think what gives me the most anxiety. It's like, oh, look, this country might join in on, like, was it last I heard, like, oh, Belarus may get involved in the invasion, or this country may get involved, or there's, like, oh, this is how it turns into something awful, more awful than just, the scope of one country or two countries, but when it becomes the scope of a continent or a world.
To, like, bring it back to our interests, although this news is of our personal interest, because... I
mean, we're interested in the world not ending, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Oh, God. And I don't have... Right, a little bit. Because I'd like to be able to continue making our stupid little show.
I need to get through, 2 seasons of Star Trek Picard. If we can do that, then you can end the world.
I need to finish... Hey, dude, I need to finish TNG here, so I need a little more time.
It's just low bars to cross here.
To bring it back to our interest, I remember seeing, I think it might have been on Kotaku, a list of Ukrainian video game developers. And there's many of them, actually. But the one that stood out to me, because we've talked about it here on the show, is the company Frogwares Studios, who is actually separate from everything that's going on, has kind of taken a stand in its own sort of defense, because they developed the game The Sinking City, the Lovecraftian-inspired sort of adventure game that I talked about a while ago, where they actually kind of... They even, like... Because they made a deal with the publisher, right? If you don't remember, we talked about this, but they're like, hey, they actually put out either an update or a press release that said, don't buy the game on these venues because that's our publisher and we don't like them anymore. And they'd gotten the actual ownership of the game back. And so, like, just wait until we can actually publish this game on these platforms ourselves. But that being said, if anything, it brings to light the idea that, especially in the nerd world, when it comes to video games, tabletop games, comics, like, it's all more interconnected now than it ever has been. And even if you feel separate from what's going on overseas, you've probably actually touched or interacted with entertainment that has had some Ukrainian integration in some shape or form. And it's important to recognize that and to support it if you want to support it, which I hope you do, because this is an invasion and they need all the support they can get. So, not to start it on a bummer, but I feel like the world's a bummer right now, and better to do this at the beginning than at the end, I would say. Mm-hmm. But speaking of bummers, we actually wanted to talk a little bit today about sort of like a grand topic, some sort of overarching umbrella of discussion that came to me because of a recent video game release called Elden Ring from
George
the company
R.R. Martin's Elden Ring.
Well, or From Software's Elden Ring. I want to say Miyazaki's Elden Ring. Only one, because I don't remember the director's first name, and 2, I didn't want to say that because there's like 14 Miyazakis that make important stuff.
I just like saying George R. R. Martin because I keep seeing his name and I'm like, what the hell do you have to do with this?
The new Game of Thrones book finally came out, and it is a video game out of Japan, and which, you know, that's a baller move. That's true. No, so From Software, the developer of the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, Sekiro, released their new game in conjunction with George R. Martin called Elden Ring, this open world Dark Soulsian adventure. And it came to my attention, not because I'm a fan of the genre, although I respect it. I'm definitely not a fan of the genre. Watch me play, I think I did a couple Dan and Rusty video game power hours of me playing Bloodborne. Mm-hmm. And that was just to get through the first mini boss. And I stopped at that point because I'm like, this is more commitment than I want to give. But I respect the genre. I respect the games that are being made by that company. And they definitely have carved a niche. And Elden Ring is this sort of, they're taking that Dark Souls, Bloodborne sort of formula and making it into an open world. And from what I understand, it's like a legitimate open world to the point where there's not even like really markers or guides to tell you where to go. And it doesn't populate the map with markers of objectives and mini games and subquests. It's just like, here's the world, have fun dying in it.
Right.
The thing is, from what I understand, the review code went out to journalist sites fairly late. But because of the news cycle, a lot of these sites felt like they had to get reviews out at the end of the embargo, the review embargo, which coincided with or right before the game's release. A lot of these reviews were going up and they were like 10 out of 10s, 5 out of 5s, whatever, right? 6 refrigerators out of 10 cupcakes. I don't know, right?
But yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of these were caveated with, I don't know if that's a verb, but let's just make it one. They had the caveat of being like, we didn't finish the game. So this is kind of a review in progress. This is based on the experience we had so far, which in fairness is probably what we should be saying for most games that are released at this point, because either games are very big, games are shipped, and I hate to say this, but like unfinished, or they're released with a day one patches which reviewers don't have access to because the patch hasn't been released yet.
Because it's not day one.
Right, indeed. It's pre-day, day -1, maybe, at the very least. But it made me think about reviews. And what is a review at this point? What's the value of reviews? And what purpose do they serve? Because I was listening to an interview with the managing editor of GameSpot, who himself, Timur Hussein, I believe, published the review of Elden Ring because he's a big From Software fan. And they published it as a review in progress. He said something really interesting, that reviews are ultimately just an arm of the marketing wing of game development. I'm like, huh. And that could be taken a couple ways. I could see cynical people going like, oh, so they're all shills and getting paid off by developers, which is not the case. Or else video game journalists would be much more wealthy. But more, it's like, it's kind of this copacetic, symbiotic relationship of like, yeah, part of getting review out on release date is to obviously get views on your site. But it is also, as a consequence, helping the sales of the game. Mm-hmm. So it made me kind of ask these questions that I wanted to bring to the table, because what a review is now in 2022 is something very different than what it was in the 90s and the 80s and maybe even like 5-10 years ago, because that word is thrown around in a lot of different contexts and with a lot of different definitions. And so I want to start with by talking about reviews in general and like kind of where are you coming at this from, Andrew, in terms of reviews and that kind of thing?
I mean, it's one of these things where I worked at the movie theater when a movie came out.
You worked at a movie theater?
At a movie theater when a movie came out that was called The Avengers.
Oh, yeah.
A movie where reviewers were not given an early screening because the perception was the movie would be reviewed poorly, and that would dampen for opening weekend ticket sales.
But it's Joss Whedon, and it brought together all these popular properties, Andrew.
Right. Yeah, it brought together...
Wait, what year did you work at the movie theater again?
Was that 1999, I think? 98?
Wait.
98.
What? That doesn't make sense.
Well, and so this was the one with Ralph Fiennes, Uma Thurman, and Sean Connery, based on the original 1960s television show.
British television shows,
right?
Especially,
but the thing about it was that like this idea that there was something inherently commercial about reviews, right? In this case, it was kind of the opposite direction, right? Like it's not like we think about it as they didn't suppress reviews, they just didn't allow them to happen.
Right.
Because
no
knew,
screeners, as those called.
No screeners, because they knew if they did, that would negatively impact their bottom line. So like it's this idea that when the editor of what you said, GameSpot, says that it's inherently part of marketing, I'm like, oh, that's actually consistent with what I've already seen,
right. 20 years ago.
or this idea that like there's a play that I did when I was in college. I was in this play. I forget what it was called. What the hell is it called? It was terrible. It was like one of these parody like plays within a play things. But the whole shtick is one of the characters is ostensibly Gene Shalit's brother.
Okay.
And the whole thing is that this, like the idea is it's a small theater company putting on a show, and that's the show. But the idea is that one of the actors is supposed to be Gene Shalit's brother. And I think actually if you look at the original cast photo, they literally had a dude that looked like Gene Shalit, the old film and theater reviewer for, I forget where he was. But it was this idea that like...
It looked like Dr. Wiley.
Right. But the idea was that you had this, the joke in the play was that they cast this guy's brother because they expected him to show up to review the play. Right. And, and so the whole premise was, even then, like that reviews were marketing. So I guess I never really did like a big think about it. Like, yes, of course reviews are marketing.
Yeah.
That's clearly always been the case. Now, it's not like we're just paying for marketing thing, but it is a type of marketing.
And actually, you bring up an interesting point there, because it is a relationship between the third party and the first party, right? Where it's the people making the product interacting with the people reviewing the product. And that's actually been that's been the source of a lot of tension, especially in the video game community, of like, well, how in the pocket are these reviewing websites? Because a lot of these developers send out copies or code, currently they send out codes of these games for free to these reviewing sites, right? Or at this point, not only to reviewing sites, but to influencers, YouTube personalities and whatnot. With I guess the implied, well, especially for the YouTube stuff, with the implied premise that they'll review it kindly because they're choosing who they send this stuff to, because it's not like a blanket distribution method for a lot of these companies. Most famously, I forget which website it was. Oh, I think it might have actually been the website giantbomb.com who leaked the information of some information about Bethesda. Oh, I don't know. I think it might have been GameSpot actually. And because of that, Bethesda does not send early copies to GameSpot anymore of their games. And it's like, there's consequences here for betraying that trust, for lack of a better, for betraying that that implied marketing relationship that is had. And it's much more ingrained in culture than we think, extending beyond video games, as you were talking about, to movies, I'm sure to TV, and any other sort of entertainment media.
So just this week, Star Trek Picard Season 2 premiered. Well, it was available for audiences on Thursday, but there was a premiere, I believe, the night before. And there are pictures on Twitter of these like premiere boxes they sent to the people that were given access to the premiere. Right. So it is people that I think they could watch it early, the first 2 episodes. And they got like a box that had, a bottle, like some cans of Earl Grey tea. It had a bottle of scotch or something, right? And
not wine? That makes the most sense.
Or maybe it was a bottle of wine. There's also, but it was a bunch of branded crap in a box. Similarly, Matt Mercer from Critical Role, although he ran a Elden Ring themed role-playing game on his show this week, he actually tweeted about this gift box they sent him that said Elden Ring, and opened it up, and it had all sorts of crap in it, including a sword.
Oh, right? Damn.
So this idea of sending crap to reviewers, to influencers, to people that will promote the thing. You know, whoa, they're not on our payroll, right? We're not paying them, but we're sending them tchotchkes. It does have feeling like, oh, you're to a certain extent you're buying, you're buying press, you know.
Which we should make it clear, developers, publishers, consider sending promo materials to a podcast for all intents and purposes.
We've been doing this for like 7 years. We've never gotten shit, you know.
And yeah, those folks are definitely not listening to us. Instead, who are listening to us are the devoted, critical, and thoughtful nerds out there, and we thank you for your patronage. Which leads me to, I guess, so the other aspect that was sticking in my craw about this, which is like, what is a review anymore? Because there are professional reviews that are published on gaming websites or movie websites or newspapers or in, you know, magazines or shown on like TV or whatever. But then there's also like Amazon reviews, Metacritic. Like, what is what at this point? Because a review,
blogs, podcasts, God forbid, YouTube
podcasts.
Channels.
Right? that kind of made me, you know, swirl down an existential, you know, a whirlpool even more when thinking about reviews, because much like Facebook has done to the word friend, like the word review has lost all meaning, because it's like, it can be anything from, this is someone's job. They've trained for this. They've spent time and money and effort and hours of their life to because that's the other thing with Tamur. And again, the interview I heard with him was on the podcast from Giant Bomb, where he went into like, he's like, don't fucking forget that, especially when companies send out code for games really late, before the embargo lifts on those reviews, like, this is crunch. Like, they're kind of forcing us to engage in crunch-like behavior, where I have to spend every waking moment of the weekend to get this review done so that my website can benefit from it, as well as a consequence, the video game publisher, right? And it's hard work, because I feel I have to spend enough time in this game, hopefully completing it, in a way, and recording my experience in a way so that I can critically analyze all the aspects of it, and then spend the time to sit down, write it in a way that's not only complete and comprehensive, but entertaining, critical, and actually adds to a conversation that is also going to give us clicks on our website.
Right.
And like that's one end of the spectrum. And then there's the person that gave a 1-star review on Amazon because the package didn't arrive fast enough.
Or you get things like on Steam,
right?
You know, was it Tabletop Simulator? Great example, right?
Yeah.
Where when there was some dispute in their forum, or like in the way that their channels were being moderated about LGBT issues, and how suddenly you saw the reviews, like if you go look at, there's this whole review spike where not in one direction, a bimodal spike, where suddenly there's a lot of 10 out of, or thumbs up, best review ever, and it says because I hate those LGBTs, and they see a bunch of negative reviews of saying this game this system doesn't make me feel safe because they whatever, and it's like, those are, say what you will about the validity of that content, but that's entirely different than what one might expect from a review. And then you get into things like places like Amazon or any of these big websites. Amazon's not alone in this. We always say Amazon, and I don't want to I don't want to just shit on them, because honestly, all these companies do it now, where suddenly it's not just they're selling products, is that those reviews are now part of the way that those products are being advertised or incentivized, right? The idea that like Drive-Thru RPG or whatever other site is going to push the things that get better reviews, right? Except those reviews are website reviews, so it's like it's you and me going on there and typing in, "This game was great, 5 stars," and we're all just rando Calrissian, but that's being given weight. And what's it, Yelp? I mean, the whole, like, it just, like, when you start really picking at it, like, the whole Yelp concept of, like, Yelp, what is it, like, not gold star reviewers, but the people that, like, just go around and Yelp everything, so suddenly their opinions have weight.
If you don't know, like, I have some friends that were, like, in that echelon of Yelp reviewers, they get buttered up by going like, you're invited, bring you yourself and two friends to come to these Yelp events that are exclusive. There'll be a celebrity there, right? It's a weird sort of reward system for a completely different tier of, or not different tier, but different angle of customer feedback, I guess, is what we're like. Personally, I want to make a distinction. This may be me being an academic elitist, a distinction between a reviewer and like customer feedback, right? But they're in a lot of venues, they're treated the same. Whether it's good or bad, it's not for me to decide.
Well, because now every customer is a fucking reviewer, right?
Right.
But then I think
the
about
democracy of the internet.
Right, but then I think about actually restaurant reviewers is great,
sure.
Right? Because the whole idea that restaurant reviewers try to be anonymous, because if they know you're like whoever the golden spoon from the New York Times,
right.
You're going to get a different experience, right? I think, in fact, I want to say there's an episode of Leverage that addresses this, where they have, they basically one of the grifter make believes, or actually, I don't remember who it is, but someone make believes that they're a food critic,
right?
And just the idea that the whoever the restaurant they're trying to con, like, fundamentally changes everything because they think this person is this famous anonymous food critic,
right?
Because again, you want to kiss the ass of the reviewers or the people that you think are bringing the value because it's marketing.
Right, and that whole ecosystem, for lack of a better word, was lampooned in a documentary I saw. Oh, fuck, what was it? It was years ago. Oh, that's right. No, it was called Ratatouille by a company called Pixar. Just a fantastic, just sort of inside scoop on how restaurant... But no, there's the antagonist, for lack of a better word, of that film is the restaurant reviewer, right? But it's, and the culminating scenes are all about pleasing that person. And speaking to exactly what you're talking about, like, which speaks to perhaps the unhealthy relationship in the pre-existing dynamic between product and reviewers. And like, that was not, like, I'm not saying that having customer reviews and these sort of pleb reviews populating the internet has made things worse. It's like things weren't particularly healthy beforehand either, because of these sort of these catering views of everything from like restaurant reviews to, like I was talking about with Bethesda, they sent code to companies that to sites that were like, you like us, therefore, going all the way back to what we're talking about with, like, it is an arm of marketing, of the marketing budget ultimately.
Yeah, and I think that, not to say that everything sucks, although everything does suck,
no. Yeah.
But there's this notion that
we're intentionally going light this week, considering everything else in the news.
But I think there's this idea that there are always problems with the systems that we have, and we've discovered new ones, right? Like, reviewing, the whole process of reviewing has always got the idea of are the reviewer, like, reviewers are being paid off or whatever, right? That's, which is, and let's reference, like, the thing, right? This whole joke of Gamergate, right? Like, they're the whole idea that producers are sleeping with reviewers to get good reviews, but this kind of thing is always like, are reviewers trustworthy? And now we've democratized it, and it's actually. What's funny is that I think, one of the arguments for democratizing reviews is, you can't buy off everyone. What you find out is, in fact, you can.
You can, right? Yeah. Like, because it doesn't take much.
To buy off everyone, it's pretty easy.
It's a cheap ticket. Send them free stuff.
Yeah. To get 1,000 good reviews on your product on the website is pretty cheap if all you have to do is buy them all a free thing, I mean, I think my takeaway from it, my thought about this is this idea of how I think there's a period where I realized this without realizing it, that if I'm going to look at reviews, if I'm going to really consider reviews,
right,
I'm going to find someone whose reviews I value.
Right.
So it becomes more of a, it's someone I like that. Oh, I like what you say. I trust your judgment and your commentary. So I'm going to look for your reviews rather than trust the public or the other, people. That
was actually how I was going to round things out. I was like, well, since this is our show, like, we can get into this personally. Like, how do you use reviews, if at all? Like, what reviews do you look at, and does it depend on the medium? Where do you go for video game discussion or warning for reviews, movies, TV. Like, do you actually consult reviews at all in some of these mediums?
Yeah, I'd actually say that I don't.
Right.
I mean, in a lot of like video games, I'm to the point where I don't. Now, there are some certain situations where word of mouth or hearing about something,
Sure,
that's important, but I don't like, if a new game comes out, I don't go check the reviews. If I probably already decided whether or not I'm going to invest in it, right? And then if I hear, oh, there's some bad reviews, well, I already chose to invest in it. I probably already pre-ordered it, right?
Right.
And I'm okay with that because that's a choice I make. Well, the thing is though, there does get stuff like, and there's a fellow on Twitter, Cory Doctorow,
Yeah.
He writes all sorts of stuff that every time I see a thread, I'm like, oh, this is pretty big-headed stuff. But he has one where he talks about, and again, going back to Amazon, but not just Amazon, and the way they have like this huge, basically ad revenue budget. And it's basically the way that they're charging people to advertise their products. But one of the commentary that came out of it was the idea of how hard it is to shop for shit online now.
Sure.
Like if you want, like it used to, like this idea, oh, I want to buy something on Amazon or on these big websites, and you look for something, and there's like now an infinity of bad choices that you're presented with.
Right.
And it no longer is it. There's no longer the idea that like, well, the ones that come up the first are the ones that are the best. Like, no, now it's the ones that paid the most in marketing.
Right.
Right.
Or even, just got the most thumbs ups or whatever,
the most
right?
thumbs ups or
SEO shit.
Right. The SEO shit. And so like there is this idea that suddenly things aren't like sometimes you just have to guess and be willing to pay the price that you made a bad choice, which it's like we've gone back to the long ago where the only person you trust is your friend that bought one too.
Right. I mean, I think that's perfectly encapsulated in the video game world. I don't know if this is the case anymore. I'm sure it is for some developers, but like the ultimate like bonuses and stuff were linked to Metacritic scores. Not even reviews, but scores. And the Metacritic score for a product is an aggregate of, honestly, their arbitrary metric that they assign to all the reviews that came out about a product across the internet. And it's like, oh no, this is a 73. Mm-hmm. And people that developed games for years that crunched, that lost families, that sacrificed their time to raise kids or just to even hang out with friends or pursue their own interests, their success hangs on a number. That's not even an official review. It's an aggregate. Mm-hmm. Because that website became so important to an industry. That to me is like that's the gender reveal balloon bursting, and instead of telling us the gender, it starts a forest fire.
Right. We just burned down half of California.
Right? And it's like there's nothing inherently wrong with reviews. But there's some codification that needs to happen to make sense of all this. If we want to say that reviews are important, which I guess might be the last question, because I guess I didn't answer my own question that I asked you, which is when it comes to reviews, I have a really and I think maybe it's my own academic background as well. My favorite thing to do is like if there's something I want to watch or play or read, I tend to just, like you said, I'm already invested in it, therefore I'm going to get it. But what I love to do is like I like to read it, play it, watch it, and develop my own take, and then go to the reviews to see maybe where my voice fits in the conversation, right? I think the only other time I engage with reviews, and this is the consequence of privilege, I guess, of having a show, which is if a show is getting if something is getting review bombed, we pay attention because it could be a good topic to talk about on our podcast, right? Ultimately, I don't know the value of reviews in a modern context. To make them matter, I personally think that we need to lay down some stratification here of what distinguishes reviews from each other, what types of reviews from each other, from aggregate scores, like on Metacritic, to professional reviews, to customer experiences, because they both, all of them, there's not one is not better or worse than the other, but they all have their different value and importance in place. And I think that needs to be recognized, because I think we can all make better decisions, which is ultimately like what we're talking about when we started this conversation. It's all about marketing and like informing the customer of a purchase or an investment. And I think each of those, every venue that uses a different aspect of reviews, whether it's customer experience, aggregate, totaling, statistics, for lack of a better word, or professional reviews, each of those has their place, depending on what you want as a customer. And I think it needs to be clearer somehow. I don't know how to do it, but something needs to happen, because it's just gonna, if it doesn't, it's just gonna become more of a mess. And I think the fallout of it is just people going on to social media and saying, this reviewer has been bought out. Clearly this game is bad because it's getting good reviews, which is the exact opposite of the intent of reviews.
Well, and I want to point out, as I often do, the harddrive.net. They had an article this week. A
satirical website, for those that don't know.
It's a satirical website. And the headline was, "Welp, looks like Elden Ring has bought off every single reviewer." Right. And it goes on to say, because again, this game got 10 out of 10 from,
everybody, despite most people admitting they hadn't finished it, which is, I'll just say this, that's okay. And I don't know how many games Andrew and I actually finish, but we can still enjoy them.
Right. What is funny is the more and more I think about it, the more I realize that, with more information, with more, whatever, how much it just comes down to, let me ask my friends.
Yeah. Or let me experience for myself,
Like suddenly I'm not looking to experts for, which now I realize how this can sound in a grander scheme of things. Like, I don't trust the experts. Right. No, but when it comes to I like this movie, I don't really care what the reviews say. It's like, well, did Dan see it? What did Taylor think? Did Kyron have an opinion?
Well, Taylor loved it, no matter what it is you're talking about.
Well, that's not true. Taylor has not loved a few things.
Yeah, right.
Which is always, that's like a red flag, right? When Taylor's like, I didn't like it, you're like, ooh, this is a bad movie, right? But so that becomes a thing, right? And I think maybe that is, to a certain extent, that's okay.
And not to get too cynical about it, but let me bring in my sort of new historicist education. During my undergraduate education as an English major, it's like reviews and critique was created mostly as a way to fill space in a newspaper. They have pages they need to fill. They have people that wanted to write and get paid for it, and so they could only fill so much of the pages that were printed with news, so much they could fill with like crime reports and whatnot. And so let's right. Fill out the other side by talking about either sports or talking about entertainment. And so like the reviews that we know now historically came out of a need to fill space in a newspaper.
And now they just fill space in the digital.
I mean, honestly, that's all we're doing is filling space at this point. Right. but that doesn't mean it's an invalid format, but like, it's interesting. This is a different conversation, but it's interesting to think about how much traditional print media is still influencing how we do things. Everything from traditional like comic strips being horizontal 4 panels. That's because that was dictated by newspaper publishers, right? Where we're seeing that inverted almost literally by things like webtoons, where we're having square panels presented vertically. Like, that's because that's better for a screen
or a phone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so like a lot, and we're finally seeing some of these old tropes that we assume. I mean, I hate to say this as a person that is actively investing in it, but like I write and draw my comics to be made for print. I don't know if that's the smartest move, because the comic book format was a creation of the magazine industry, where you literally turned a magazine on its side and sold something new. Where, as we all say, print is a dying industry. So that's something we should maybe table and come back to at some point, like the long tail of the print industry and whether there's any validity left.
Well, and given the news going back to Ukraine, that is a big conversation.
Indeed. Yes.
Just based on now the stories that shipping may increase even more than it's already increased.
The point is, you should buy The Sinking City, made by Ukrainian developer Frogwares, and support any Ukrainian company.
This is Dan's A+ good review.
Indeed, it is a game that was fine. So, if you have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net, wherever our website is, I'm not sure.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on Facebook.
You can find us on other social media, such as Twitter, where you can find us at respective handles. Andrew is found at Profound Dark, where you can find him tweeting about thoughts and discussions in tabletop role-playing games.
Mostly about tabletop role-playing games.
And you can find me at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram. You can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at dbethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can take a look at our YouTube page, which is now another source to find our show.
Indeed. If you'd like to spend an hour or so on YouTube and stare at our week's show image while listening to our voices, YouTube is the place to be.
Although I get really anxious that somehow our show is going to get wrapped into the algorithm, and someone who's listening to it is the next thing up. Jordan Peterson discusses why women are the worst, and God damn it.
I mean, anything will lead to that ultimately on YouTube. We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcast app or YouTube, or maybe you still use Spotify. Either way, what would help us most would be to go to their storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether that's a text review or their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithm. Algorithms. Speaking of reviews are out for this brand new movie called
Star Trek Picard.
That's not a movie.
Oh, shit.
Ted Batman is out. Sorry, I typed it wrong. The Batman. There we go. Autocorrect. It's a punk. Yeah, this is a new Batman. You know what? I know our friend of the show, Taylor, as well as the rest of the world, is very excited for this film. I was super lukewarm on it. The trailers did nothing for me. But to be relevant to this week's topic, once the reviews started coming out, I started getting interested because apparently they're really leaning into the detective angle of Batman. It's people describing it as a crime thriller, a noir detective story.
So what you're saying is it wasn't the quantitative part, it was the qualitative part of the review that was relevant for you.
And the Metacritic score was really yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, this actually, because honestly, maybe I'm just old and cranky, which welcome to the show, everybody. That's kind of our bag. It kind of looked like every other Batman movie. Like we've
seen this
since Christopher Nolan. Like it's dark and punching and gravelly voice.
With Christopher Nolan, I said
Adam West back when it was gritty and real.
Well, Adam West was not gritty, but I mean Tim Burton.
I mean, that's very stylized, Art Deco.
Still dark and gritty.
Yeah, I guess, but
certainly no Adam West.
Certainly no Adam West. But I'm actually kind of excited for the movie now, and maybe we should have our on the ground DC correspondent come on to talk about it at some point. But maybe I say at some point because who knows when Andrew and I or I will see it, which will probably be for a while. But if you see it, I hope you enjoy it. So until you enjoy a new movie, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. I'm testing something totally unnecessary.
Oh yeah, the Glenn signal?
Apparently I tested the Glenn signal. What's up?
Glenn time.
Just trying to find the silver lining in the gray dawn.
Deep.
Hold on, Silver Lining in the Gray Dawn. That's the name of my next album.
Just
I am asexual. I do not engage in that kind of behavior.
You mean asexual man? You're asexual dude.
There goes Glenn, inserting spaces.
Inserting spaces. Uniting the races. It's Glenn.
We are adults. Adults that make jokes.
We are two white guys making a podcast.
When you put it that way.
So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments. I dropped my thing. Let me start that again.